Hi YouTube, Big Apple again here with a video about carrying, either open or concealed. Carrying with an empty chamber, fail. I'm going to explain why I think it's a really bad idea. So why do people insist on carrying with an empty chamber? Well, it's simply an irrational fear that the gun is just going to go off. Who's to blame? Mostly movies and media. It's misinformation. So I can think of one movie off the top of my head. The 30 minutes or less movie where they strap a bomb to the pizza delivery guy, and he has to rob a bank with Aziz Ansari. So security guard tosses him his revolver out of his holster while they're robbing the bank, and it touches a wall and just goes off. The only time I could actually think where that may be relevant are the very, very old single-action revolvers that have a hammer mounted to the firing pin. Most modern firearms have fail-safes to prevent this from happening. The Series 80 1911 has a firing pin block. The Beretta 92 has a firing block. Most other modern hammer-fired guns have a firing pin block. Pretty much all striker-fired pistols now have a firing pin block. There's a button in here right behind the firing pin that prevents the firing pin from passing this point unless the trigger is all the way back here. So that would prevent any sort of inertia of you dropping a gun or anything from it touching the primer on a loaded round. That would prevent that from happening. That's why it's there. So it wouldn't just go off. Welcome to reality, guys. Unless the gun has a severe mechanical flaw, the only time it'll fire is if the trigger's manipulated. And this gets to accidental versus negligent discharges. Your finger shouldn't be near the trigger anyway, but there's a difference between accidental and negligent. Accidental, obviously, you didn't intend for it to go off and it did, and negligent is that you did something really stupid and it went off. So accidental may be, for example, if you're on the range and you shoot and you remove your finger too fast after the reset and you accidentally bump fire one and you do like that. That to me would be an accidental discharge. You know, nothing stupid happening. So a negligent discharge would be like if somebody saw a gun sitting on the table and they immediately went like this. This is always bad. I see this in movies all the time too. I was just watching The Walking Dead the other day. Guy was sitting with the gun pointed towards the ground with his finger on the trigger like this. Your finger should not be near the trigger unless you're ready to fire. Unless you have a target in front of you, a person, whatever you're intending to stop. If it's a perpetrator or a piece of paper or a steel plate or a deer, whatever it is, your finger shouldn't be near that trigger. It's inexcusable. So most popular holsters cover the trigger guard, as mine does right here, as you can see. And there's no way for me to actually push that trigger while it's sitting in there. I don't recommend holsters that don't. There are some pocket holsters that don't cover the trigger. I've seen some LCP pocket holsters that have an opening to where you can just grab it like a wallet and pull the trigger through it, but I really don't suggest buying those. I think they're very unsafe, especially sitting in your pocket. If you're fumbling to grab it, you could shoot yourself through the leg. So what do some people say that carry with an empty chamber? Well, I'll have time to rack the slide. Well, will you really have time to rack the slide? And what if you only have one hand available? I read a study a long time ago that said it only takes a matter of maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds, maybe a little bit more for a person at full sprint, the average person at full sprint, to cover about 20 feet. So if somebody's running at you that quickly, do you think you're going to have time to draw to your holster, rack it all the way, and then come up on target? I mean, you better be lightning fast. And then the other thing is, what if you only have one hand available? So if you're fighting off somebody with one hand and you have to draw with the other one, well, now your chances are left to you racking it off your belt or finding your shoe and racking it off your shoe. That's the only way, and you better hope that your sight back here has a hard surface, a hard edge that you can actually rack it off of. If you don't have those things, well, then your gun's just a big metal and plastic club. So it also increases your chances for failure. It adds motion to the draw, and this is also the most likely time for a semi-automatic pistol to fail. So the most common problems once the gun starts firing with a semi-automatic pistol is usually attributed to magazines. That's usually the majority of failures. There are some others, but usually it's magazines. But the easiest time for a gun to fail is when you're first loading that first round. Because what most people want to do, instead of racking it hard and letting it go like that, they insist on pulling it back and then pushing it forward. Well, obviously a gun doesn't work like that on its own, so there's a chance for it to fail there too. Also, if you have a dump of adrenaline and you only rack it about this much, well, guess what? You just didn't get around in there. Now this is still just a plastic and metal hammer. Or if you rack back far enough, but you let it slide forward slowly and it gets hung up or something like this, well, your gun still is useless, unable to be used. So If you need to build confidence, you can carry, I suggest people carry an empty chamber for a week and check every day to see if the trigger pulls itself. Because, I mean, I've never carried my gun to where it just accidentally goes off, but I've also never carried with an empty chamber because I've been confident. If you need to build your confidence, that's fine, but once your confidence is built, I strongly suggest you chamber around. The next thing too, I have here listed as safeties. If you've seen my other video, you know that I don't carry the Ruger with the safety engaged. I leave it off. That's because I don't want to add an extra motion to my draw where I have to swipe the safety like that. I'd much rather just draw it, have it ready to go, and I know it's not going to just shoot itself. I know it's not going to just go off. It's going to be fine, especially if the trigger's covered. I don't see any reason for this to have any sort of mechanical failure and to shoot me through my butt. It's just not going to happen. So if you need to carry with an empty chamber for a little bit to get confidence, if you're new to firearms, I guess I won't say fail, but build your confidence and then carry with a round chambered. And you can use your safety if you want to integrate it in your training, but I also suggest you eventually stray away from safeties because they can always fail. They're mechanical, just like I said in my last video. Your greatest safety is between your ears and right here. So this is Big Apple signing out. Hope you enjoyed.